Part 1. Continue. Visual city skyline at night. Thousands of lights blinking, data flowing, visualization overlay across buildings. You've seen it before. A city goes dark. Phones stop loading. ATMs freeze mid-transaction. Air traffic control screens flicker, then nothing. And for a moment, it feels like a glitch. It's not. Visual close-up of smartphone showing no service, while emergency sirens faintly in background. Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow. No Wi-Fi. No mobile data. No GPS. No cloud. No banking apps. Just silence. No notifications. No maps. No connection. Now stretch that silence across an entire country. Then across continents. Because in modern war, the internet isn't just a tool. It's the nervous system of civilization. Cut it and everything starts failing. Visual undersea fiber optic cable diagram stretching across oceans with highlighted choke points. Here's the part most people miss. The internet isn't in the air. It's not some invisible cloud floating above us. About 99% of global data, yes, 99, travels through physical cables. Fiber optic lines, thinner than a garden hose, running across ocean floors for 1.3 million kilometers. You cut those. You don't slow the internet. You erase it. Visual naval sabotage team deploying equipment near seabed cable. And countries know exactly where those cables are. The UK identified 60 critical cable choke points in a 2022 defense report. Russia has specialized submarines like the Yanta class, designed not for combat, but for deep-sea cable interference. The US. It quietly monitors the same infrastructure through the Navy's Undersea Warfare Division. This isn't theory. It's planning. Visual map of global internet exchange hubs glowing: London, Frankfurt, Singapore, Ashburn, Virginia. But cutting cables is just the beginning. Because even if some connections survive, the internet still depends on central hubs, internet exchange points. Places like Frankfurt, London, Singapore, Ashburn, Virginia, often called the data center capital of the world. Ashburn alone handles up to 70% of global internet traffic passing through at some point. You take that out. The system doesn't degrade gracefully. It collapses. Visual server racks shutting down one by one in a massive data center. Let's walk through what actually happens. Hour 0. You try to load a page. Nothing. Maybe it spins. Maybe it times out. At first, you think it's your router. Then your phone. Then your provider. Then you realize it's not just you. Visual busy urban street, people looking confused at phones, traffic lights malfunctioning. Within minutes, messaging apps fail. No WhatsApp. No Telegram. No emails. And here's where it gets real. Traffic systems, many rely on cloud-based coordination. Lights desync. Ride-hailing apps. Dead. Food delivery. Gone. Convenience disappears first. Then structure. Visual ATM screen error message. Long queue forming behind frustrated customers. Within hours, banking starts to break. Modern financial systems don't run locally. They sync constantly with central servers. Your card swipe. It needs authorization. Your transfer. It needs routing. Without internet, Banks switch to offline mode temporary. Limited. ATMs run out of cash within 6 to 12 hours in major cities based on Federal Reserve stress simulations. Then they stop. No cash. No digital. Just numbers trapped in systems you can't reach. Visual hospital ICU with monitors, staff scrambling, some systems offline. Now hospitals. This is where things turn dangerous. Most modern hospitals use networked systems for patient records, imaging, even drug dispensing. In 2017, during the WannaCry cyberattack, the UK's NHS cancelled over 19,000 appointments in a single week. That was a cyberattack. Now imagine total disconnection. Doctors lose access to patient histories. Lab results can't sync. Equipment still works, but coordination doesn't. And in medicine, coordination is everything. Visual air traffic control tower with blank radar screens. Air travel doesn't instantly fall out of the sky. Let's be clear. Planes can fly without the internet, but they can't operate at scale without it. Air traffic control relies on radar, yes, but also constant data exchange between systems. Flight plans, weather updates, routing adjustments. The FAA processes about 45,000 flights per day in US airspace alone. Remove the data layer. Flights get grounded. Vast. Not because planes can't fly, but because chaos kills. Visual cargo port with halted cranes and idle shipping containers. Then supply chains. This is the quiet killer. Global logistics runs on just-in-time delivery, meaning goods arrive exactly when needed, not stored in bulk. Walmart alone processes over 255 million customer visits per week globally, with inventory systems syncing in real time. No internet. Warehouses don't know what to ship. Ports don't know what's arriving. Trucks don't know where to go. And within 72 hours, supermarket shelves start to empty. Visual grocery store shelves gradually going empty, people panic buying. Not slowly. Vast. Milk. Bread. Medicine. Fuel. Gone. Because the system isn't built for disconnection. It's built for efficiency. And efficiency breaks under stress. Visual close-up of a soldier operating a drone controller, then screen cuts to black. Now take this into the military domain. Modern warfare doesn't just use the internet. It depends on it. Drones like the Bayraktar TB2, introduced by Turkey in 2014, rely on data links for targeting and control. Satellite communications coordinate units across hundreds of kilometers. Even basic infantry units use encrypted apps for coordination, what soldiers call shoot, move, communicate. Take away communication. You don't just slow an army. You blind it. Visual battlefield radio operator switching to analog equipment under stress. Which brings us to someone like Staff Sergeant Daniel Reyes, 38 years old. U.S. Army Signal Specialist. His job: keep communication alive. In training exercises, they simulate exactly this scenario: total digital blackout. No satellite. No internet. No GPS. Reyes switches to what feels like ancient tech. Radio relays. Line of sight antennas. Even handwritten message chains. It works, but it's slow, painfully slow. And in combat, Seconds matter. Visual GPS map turning blank, soldier looking confused in unfamiliar terrain. Let's talk about GPS. Because people assume GPS is separate from the internet. It's not entirely. The satellites still broadcast signals, yes. But the systems that integrate GPS into logistics, navigation apps, military coordination, those rely heavily on data networks. Lose that layer, and suddenly navigation becomes guesswork. Even trained soldiers feel it. Now imagine civilians. Visual dense fog over city streets, people navigating blindly. This is where panic starts. Because when systems fail, people fill the gap with emotion. And emotion spreads faster than any virus. Rumors, fear, misinformation, ironically, even without the internet, word travels. But without verification, no official updates, no trusted sources, just uncertainty. And uncertainty breaks societies. Visual power grid control room with warning lights flashing. Now here's the twist. You might think electricity fails first. It doesn't. Power grids can operate independently for a while. But they rely on internet-connected monitoring systems for load balancing, fault detection, coordination across regions. In 2003, a blackout in the US and Canada affected 50 million people, partly due to software failure in monitoring systems. Now imagine that, but no internet to coordinate recovery. Blackouts last longer, much longer. Visual military command center with multiple screens going offline simultaneously. And here's the deeper layer. Modern warfare isn't just about destroying things. Part 2, Adaptation and Aftermath. Visual dimly lit command bunker, analog radios humming, paper maps spread across a wooden table. So now we're in the second phase. The silence settles in. The shock fades. And what replaces it isn't chaos. It's adaptation. Vast, uneven, brutal. Visual military conv, using paper maps and hand signals in dusty terrain. Let's start with the systems that don't collapse, because they never depended on the internet in the first place. Analog communication, old-school radio, high-frequency bands, what operators call HF, can bounce signals off the ionosphere and reach thousands of kilometers. No satellites, no cables, just physics. Range, up to 3,000 kilometers under the right conditions. Speed, slow. Clarity, worse than your worst phone call. But it works. And in war, works is enough. Visual amateur radio operator, ham radio, in a cluttered room, emergency setup active. There's a reason countries still maintain civilian radio networks. In the US, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, ARES, has over 50,000 licensed operators. In Japan, after the 2011 earthquake, when telecom networks failed, ham radio operators became the backbone of communication. Between isolated regions, no internet, no infrastructure, just people and signals, short lines, long reach. Visual Chinese, Beidou satellite constellation, visualization orbiting Earth. Now look at navigation. Because not everyone relies on the same system. The US has GPS. Europe has Galileo. Russia has GLONASS. China has Beidou, completed globally in 2020, with over 35 satellites. Here's the important part. These systems are independent. So even if one network collapses or gets jammed, others can fill the gap partially. China's Beidou, for example, offers regional text messaging capability directly via satellite. Limited, but functional. It's not smooth, but it's something. Visual soldier receiving short text message via satellite device in remote desert. Which brings us to satellite phones. Devices like the Iridium 9575 Extreme, introduced in the 2010s, connect directly to satellites. No towers needed. Coverage global. Latency high. Cost about $1,500 per device, plus expensive airtime. Governments stockpile these. Military units rely on them. And during blackouts, they become lifelines. But here's the catch. Bandwidth is tiny. You're not streaming anything. You're barely sending text. Communication shrinks to essentials. Visual Cyber Warfare Command Center, operators launching digital attacks. Now let's flip the perspective. Because if you can destroy the internet, you can also weaponize its absence. Cyber warfare doesn't always mean hacking into systems. Sometimes it means taking them away. In 2022, Ukraine experienced multiple internet disruptions. During the early stages of the conflict, satellite provider Viasat was hit, affecting thousands of modems across Europe. Not bombs, code, and the effect. Units disconnected, coordination delayed, confusion amplified, silent damage. Visual Russian Yanta-class submarine schematic highlighting deep-sea capabilities. Back to those cables. Because this is where things get surgical. The Yanta-class vessel, operated by Russia, is believed to carry deep-sea submersibles, capable of reaching depths of 6,000 meters. That's where many transatlantic cables lie. You don't need to destroy all of them. Just a few. Strategically placed. And suddenly, entire regions slow to a crawl. Or drop offline entirely. It's not brute force. It's precision. Visual Data Center exterior with heavy security, guards and surveillance systems. And then there are the data centers. Places like Ashburn, Virginia, or Frankfurt's DCIX exchange, one of the largest in the world, handling over 15 terabits per second of peak traffic. These aren't just buildings. They're bottlenecks. You disable them physically or digitally, and the ripple spreads globally. No explosions required. Just interruption. Visual engineer inside server room manually reconnecting cables under emergency lighting. Now let's bring in someone on the ground. Anna Mueller, 34, network engineer in Frankfurt. When outages begin, she's not panicking. She's rerouting, switching traffic through alternative paths, prioritizing critical services, hospitals, government systems, emergency responders. But here's the reality. There are limits. You can reroute around damage. You can't reroute around absence. At some point, there's nowhere left to send the data. And that's when systems go dark. Visual split screen, advanced military tech on one side, guerrilla fighters on the other. Now here's where the pattern reveals itself. Stay with me, because this is the part most people don't see. Modern advanced militaries, the US, NATO forces, high-tech armies, are incredibly powerful. Precision weapons, real-time intelligence, global coordination. But all of that depends on connection. Then look at less advanced forces, insurgents, guerrilla units, decentralized groups. They operate differently. Local knowledge, simple tools, minimal reliance on centralized systems. When the internet disappears, who loses more? Visual drone feed cutting out mid-flight, operator frustrated. The high-tech side. Because their advantage, coordination, disappears. Drones lose feeds. Command structures slow down. Decision-making fragments. Meanwhile, low-tech forces keep moving. They were never dependent to begin with. And this leads to the one insight. That changes everything. Modern war isn't just about who has better weapons. It's about who can keep functioning. When systems fail, resilience beats sophistication. Every time. Visual burning tank wreck next to cheap drone debris on battlefield. Think about this. A $500 drone, the kind you can buy commercially, can destroy a $3 million tank. We've seen it in Ukraine. Repeatedly. Now remove the internet. That cheap drone, still usable locally. That advanced tank needs coordination, needs data, needs support. The balance shifts dramatically. Cheap, simple, local versus expensive, complex, connected. And when connection dies, the equation flips. Visual civilians forming lines for water distribution, organized manually. Back to civilian life. Because adaptation isn't just military. Communities start organizing. Local distribution centers replace digital logistics. Paper records come back. Bulletin boards, physical notices, word-of-mouth networks. It feels older, slower, but also more tangible. You know where things are, because you see them, not because an app tells you. Visual classroom setting with teacher using chalkboard instead of digital tools. Education shifts. No online classes. No digital materials. Teachers go back to chalkboards. Printed books. Information becomes localized. What you know depends on where you are, not what you can search. And that changes how people think, because access to information becomes uneven again, like it was decades ago. Visual news broadcast studio with limited reach, people gathered around radios. Media transforms. No social media. No instant updates. Radio and television regain importance, but with limited reach and slower dissemination. Governments control narratives more tightly, because fewer channels exist, and fewer channels are easier to control. Visual border checkpoint with manual paperwork, long lines of vehicles waiting. International movement slows to a crawl. No digital passports. No real-time databases. Border checks become manual. Verification takes time. Lots of it. Travel doesn't stop, but it becomes rare, deliberate, and slow. Visual close-up of person writing in notebook by candlelight. And on an individual level, life shrinks. Your world becomes physical, local, immediate. You know your neighbors. You rely on nearby resources, not global networks. It's not necessarily worse, but it's very different. Visual satellite view of Earth at night, some regions dark, others dimly lit. Now zoom out. Because globally, the world doesn't end. It fragments. Regions with remaining infrastructure, partial networks, satellite access, resilient systems, keep functioning at reduced capacity. Others fall silent. Disconnected islands. And over time, new networks emerge. Localized, independent, redundant. Because if there's one thing humans are good at, it's rebuilding systems. Smarter, stronger, harder to break. Visual engineers installing new underground cables with reinforced protection. Future infrastructure won't look like today's. More redundancy, more decentralization, more protection, both physical and digital. Countries are already investing in this. The EU's Secure Connectivity Initiative. The US pushing for resilient network architectures. In defense planning, because they've all realized the same thing. The internet is no longer optional. It's strategic terrain. Like land, sea, air, space. Now, there's a fifth domain, and it's invisible. Visual final shot, person staring at dark phone screen, then looking up at real world around them. So what happens if the internet is erased in war? The world doesn't explode. It slows. It fragments. It adapts. And the winners aren't the ones with the fastest networks. They're the ones who can survive without them. Because in the end, the most dangerous weapon in modern war isn't the one that destroys. It's the one that disconnects. And once that happens, everything else follows.